All right, it's a fresh start to rewrite Nigeria's history. It's being pushed for by 71 legislators of the House of Representatives who are calling for a constitutional amendment to change Nigeria from the presidential system of governance to the parliamentary system of governance that was in practice in the First Republic.
Yes, indeed. And the legislators say compelling advantages of the parliamentary system of government are the driving force behind their vision. They insist the parliamentary system of government promotes inclusion and collectiveness, which are critical to equality of income distribution and opportunities.
Studies have shown empirically that countries run by presidential regime consistently produce low output growth, higher and more volatile inflation, and greater income inequality relative to those under parliamentary ones. Little wonder the rich continues to be richer, while the poor get poorer.
The presidential system of government is very, very expensive to practice, especially for a developing country like Nigeria, and also for a country that is multi-ethnic and multi-religious.
We need not forget to let you know that in a parliamentary system, power belongs more to the people and the...
Legislators making their minds known there.
Well, if Nigeria eventually adopts the parliamentary system of government, it will not be the only African country that practices it. Ethiopia, Mauritius, South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Somalia all practice the parliamentary system of government.
Well, except Zimbabwe, that has a special case because the presidential system there is kind of a unique one. Joining us to examine the dynamics of the call for parliamentary system of government is presidential candidate of the Young Progressive Party, Professor Kingsley Moghalu. Professor, good morning.
Thank you.
It's good to have you join us now.
Nice to see you.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
And we also have a presidential candidate of the Providence People's Party, Victor Okai. Good morning.
Thank you. Providence People's Congress.
Congress,
PPC.
rather.
Providence People's
exactly, that's
Congress.
PPC.
PPC. Yeah. All right, joining us via Skype is a social commentator, Kayode Ogundamisi. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
Okay, let's begin this way. I mean, both of you are presidential candidates. I'm told that we should start with Kayode. Let's take it to Kayode then. Kayode Ogundamisi, now we've done parliamentary before. Now we're doing presidential, and a lot of people, some people are asking, what difference really does it make? I mean, is it really about the system of government that we adopt, or the values that we bring to whatever system that we actually agree upon?
Let me put it this way. I live in the UK, and we practice a parliamentary system of government. And I've lived in Nigeria, and it's a presidential system of government. What I would say is that if you pick all the current practitioners of the presidential system in Nigeria, the politicians, and bring them to the UK, this system here will be run down. Completely will become dysfunctional. So there is nothing wrong with the system of government. What is wrong is how we practice the system of government in Nigeria. It is too expensive. If you're talking about a parliamentary system of government, it would be a bicameral system of government, the House of Lords and then the House of Commons. You still have the same representation across Nigeria, and they will still be paid huge sum of money. What the lawmakers should be talking about is how to reduce the cost of running the National Assembly. I mean, we run the most expensive National Assembly in the world. There's nowhere in the world where lawmakers earn more than presidents in almost 80% of African countries. So what they should be looking at is cutting their expenses, and it's not the system. And let me also draw your attention that if we talk about a parliamentary system of government, that means you're not going to have direct election. You're just going to have parliament, which means, for example, in areas where you have more population, say from northern part of the country, they would always produce the prime minister in terms of population. So the problem is not with the system, the problem is the practitioners of the system.
Okay.
Professor Moghalu, let me come to you on this. On the 18th of October 1975, General Murtala Mohammed announced for the first time the intention to transit the government into a presidential system away from the parliamentary. And he made that announcement in Victoria Island. And Chief Rotimi Williams was the first to be the chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee at the time and all of that. Now, in the speech that day, he was talking about how they had consulted wide and seen the flaws of the parliamentary system, and they decided to explore and experiment the presidential system of government, which we did in the Second Republic, and then in the Third Republic, and even in the Fourth Republic we are now, is what we're practicing. So when lawmakers are saying we should go back to the presidential system, the parliamentary system rather, what's your take on this?
Well, my take is, first of all, I think I agree with Kayode that the real issue is in the value system that is embedded in Nigeria's politics. That's the first problem we need to address. And the only thing that can address that problem is a leadership revolution. It's not about the type of system. Each system, whether presidential or parliamentary, has its advantages and disadvantages. The presidential system is true, expensive, but it is stable. The parliamentary system is cheaper, but can be unstable because it depends on votes of confidence of the parliament. The prime minister has to be an already elected member of parliament, and it's not a direct election. It must have been somebody who has been elected as a member of parliament in a constituency that is not a national constituency.
So especially if you look at what is happening in the UK now.
Exactly.
With
Brexit.
With Brexit and all of that,
That's right.
volatility going on
There's
there.
a lot
so you
of
would
volatility.
not advise that that's even a template that we should adopt at all?
Even if we were to adopt it, it's not something we should rush into. I think the whole question of whether we should have a parliamentary or presidential system of government is a matter that should be addressed as part of the constitutional restructuring of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which of course I, as a presidential candidate, have proposed, and with some detail as to how we should proceed. So I think it's such a heavy item to start taking on now as a separate issue. It should be part of a discussion and an agreement about a new Nigeria. Should it remain with the presidential system, or should we move to the parliamentary system? But that has to go with the restructuring, because if you now come and introduce it with the current structure, I don't see that it will yield the kind of benefits that people expect.
Okay. Now, Victor Hyde, a lot of people have, political analysts say that usually countries that have a complex makeup, either the tiers of government and then regions and then ethnicity and then religion and all of that, the presidential system is always recommended so that there can be this semblance of sense of belonging to all minorities, so-called minorities, and all sections of the country. What is your take on this?
Well, I'd like to draw from what Kayode said as well. He put it quite brilliantly when he talked about the issue of the cost of governance and the attitude of the people, if you like, those in government, as a whole. And so there are imbalances that need to be addressed if we must. I mean, if we're going to do any form of constitutional review, there are certain things that need to be put in place. You mentioned, I think, the issue of an imbalance in perhaps lopsidedness in maybe one group being dominant over the other. And so what we need to do is in reviewing the Constitution and in addressing some sort of, or doing some sort of restructuring, all of these fears have to be brought in place. Not a situation where one group is dominant over the other. And so, for instance, as a party, we are thinking about the situation, and we're looking at this quite seriously as well, where if you're talking about some sort of constitutional review or restructuring, you have to be able to restructure in such a way that there's an equitable distribution, not necessarily along population lines, because data has been there's no reliable data for population in this country. We've seen cases where they say people use palm kernels, and I'm sure you've heard the story, to, mark, to thumbprint, you understand? And so when you see a situation like that, you obviously know that if you depend on a system like that, then it's obviously going to work. So what we need to be looking at is an equitable system where every group is equally represented.
So
and then population
in that case, it doesn't matter the system of government that is run?
Exactly. You see, we need to address those fears, those injustices, and those areas of disadvantages that have been entrenched into the system deliberately over the years to give advantage to certain sections of the country over other sections. So these are things that we need to address so that there is a sense of fairness, there's a sense of justice, and all comers feel that they are a part of the system, not a situation where if you choose to take the parliamentary system, for instance, then there's a fear that a group will be dominant, you know, unless these things are addressed. Then
but those are the fears in the first place that made Nigeria think, okay, let's go to a presidential system so that everybody has a sense of belonging.
That is
Professor Moghalu, yes.
That is why I think that as intelligent and as I think, you know, laudatory as the recommendation is, it is at the surface of the problem. The real problems of Nigeria are far more fundamental. And we need to address those problems and stop running from system to system without looking at ourselves first. This country, is it a nation? Nigeria is not yet a nation. It's just a country and a broken one, as I have often said. So we need to look more at addressing the real fundamental issues, which I think constitutional restructuring will do. The injustice, the instability, the fears of marginalization. What is the national question? What is the basis of being a Nigerian? Is it because you come from an ethnic group or an ethnic nationality, or is it because you carry the political identity of Nigerian citizenship, which is what I recommend? Because if you continue to base our being Nigerian on ethnic nationalities, it's more divisive rather than unifying.
Okay, let me take it to Kayode Ogundamisi there via Skype. I mean, we have practiced the same parliamentary system of government. Of course, all you three gentlemen seem to agree, you know, that it's really not about the system, but, you know, the people who actually run the system, you know, more or less.
We need to change that.
We ran a parliamentary system of government, and it did not stop the 1966 coup from happening. And the basis of that coup was nepotism. They talked about corruption, economic injustice, you know, ethnic sentiments, and all of that. And then we went in the way of presidential, and we're still saying the same thing.
Yeah, it means we're used to running away from the problem, from the issues in Nigeria. We actually know the solution. We have the solution. What we don't have is how do we proceed? In our country now, every part of Nigeria now agree there is the need for a sovereign national conference or a review, or constitutional review, or readdressing the lopsidedness in our country. Almost all the major political parties, or almost all the political parties, agree that there are segments of our country who do not have a sense of belonging. Almost everyone is talking about the national question and how to move Nigeria forward. The problem we have is how do we do it?
So how do we do it? We have had the national conferences, we've had the confabs, and how do we do it?
There are very simple fruits that we can capture. Say, for example, the issue of state police. You know, nothing stops the current lawmakers and the executive agreeing on devolving a police that reflects the diversity of our country, where local policing will be made. The vice president, for example, said he supports local police and devolving national police. But the lawmakers are not doing anything about it. They mouth it, but they won't do it in practice. So all we need is legislation that will be tabled before all the political parties, and there will be bipartisan approach to resolving our crisis. But once you politicize these issues, you will never go forward, because all these talks are campaign strategies by major political parties. But if they all agree that we have a huge problem here, we will be able to resolve the issues confronting us as a nation. The problem is the practitioners must be sincere about moving the country forward. And I'm actually glad that right now we're not having people from other parts of the country objecting to the fact that we need to address the national question in our country. All we need is just a sense of purpose and a sense of sincerity in practical terms.
Okay, let me come back to you, Professor Moghalu. The population is a factor, one way or the other. If you look at many of the African countries who were under British rule, most of them practice, most of them have left to practice the presidential system right now, except for maybe South Africa that has a mix of, a uniquely mixed kind of a parliamentary system and then the presidential system, all inclusive one way or the other, and then a few others. But the population of Nigeria, do you think is a factor that is making Nigeria not to move forward towards being able to handle some of these things expeditiously? Because recently, Senegal, I think Senegal was able to, move from bicameral legislation to unicameral.
Yeah.
Yes, the population of Nigeria is a big problem for Nigeria. Right. But it could be something that drives Nigeria as a big, great global economic power. The reason it has failed to achieve its potential is because we have a fundamental problem that we have not addressed. And therefore, population is being used in the wrong manner. It's being used as a tool for political dominance by some sections of the country over others. It is being seen as a manifestation of Nigeria's greatness, whereas it is actually a lot more people being miserably poor than smaller countries. We are poverty capital of the world. So what has population done for us? So the population of Nigeria is something that needs to be seen differently. And that requires a leadership with a worldview of transformation. That we can bring our 200 million people and liberate them from poverty. How do you do that? By addressing the fundamental economic issues. Skills for young people, very important. Jobs that come from having skills, very important. An innovation-driven economy that emphasizes new ways of thinking and creating wealth rather than political entitlement culture, which is what population is being used for in Nigeria. So we need a different type of leader in this country, a leader that can bring about a paradigm shift so that our population works for us. Right now, our population is working against us.
Okay, Victor. A lot of people, I mean, including the reps, the 71, reps members who, incidentally, I mean, seem to agree. I mean, this seems to be a bipartisan project. The talk about parliamentary system of government. What they're saying is it's more cost effective. But as a matter of fact, this presidential system that we're practicing now has turned Nigeria into the poverty capital of the world. Just like you just alluded to. Is that not a strong enough argument, really, to begin to consider going parliamentary?
Well, if it is going to reduce the number of legislators, then perhaps that's a beginning point. First, in order to be able to answer that properly, we have to be able to look at what the parliamentary system is compared with the presidential system, because only then can the audience understand. Yes, in the parliamentary system, what happens is people are elected from the various constituencies into parliament. And then within parliament, they elect one of their own, some sort of primus inter pares, first among equals. They would have agreed on who would be the parliament. In some cases, you may have...
From the ruling party.
Well, the party sometimes you may not have the majority to constitute. And so you find coalitions, okay? And then in a situation like that, then you go in bed with other parties so that you'll be able to form government. Okay, and one of the strong points of the parliamentary system is that the Prime Minister is beholden to Parliament. Okay, what he does is every decision you have to come and debate. It's not like the presidential system where you have like absolute monarchy, if you excuse my use of that language. Where I mean, it is said that Nigeria has one of the most powerful. Exactly, this power can be abused. But the parliamentary system, there are checks and balances, but within the legislature. You might also look at a situation where you might argue about the tyranny of the majority, where because you're a majority party, you can lord it over other members as well. But the good thing about it is a prime minister that misbehaves can be recalled at any time. So there's this constant pressure on the prime minister to ensure that he carries along the representatives of the people in parliament, other parliamentarians. In the presidential system, the president is, elected independently of of Parliament.
The way we do in Nigeria.
Exactly.
You said earlier that you were going to, you would actually prefer a constitutional restructuring. I wonder, very briefly, if you can tell us exactly, I mean,
what do I mean by that?
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
You see, what Nigeria needs to do in our constitutional restructuring is a couple of things. First of all, when I talk about constitutional restructuring, I mean the refederalization of Nigeria. Nigeria is a big, diverse country. History and experience have shown us that countries such as ours should be run as federations, which allow the federating units the space to develop at their own pace, to control their own resources, to control their own governance with some autonomy. And we had that in the 1963 Constitution. But since the 1966 coup, Nigeria has become effectively a unitary government. Even when democracy was restored, the decree in 1969 that took away the control of the regions, no, 1969, when the federal government took control, direct control of Nigeria's mineral resources. See, that decree has not been affected in any substance. So the resources, the mineral resources in this country go directly to the federal government. That is antithetical to the idea of a federation anywhere in the world. So in restructuring, one, we must come back to a proper federation where there are two units of governance, the central government and sub-national governments. You must have, I recommend, in Nigeria, that the federating units should be geopolitical zones, which become geoeconomic zones, not states. And I have made the argument for why this is much more preferable. And then I believe that the local governments should not be a third tier in the Constitution. They should be created and managed by the sub-regional, sub-national governments, that is, regions. That is what a proper federation is.
Well,
a lot of Nigerians, certainly, that's a debate that a lot of Nigerians are going to say, but it's good for business, as one would say. Now, Kayode, I understand we have to round it off here now. Thank you very much, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, for coming on the program, presidential candidate of the Young Progressive Party. Thank you so much. And Victor Okai, presidential candidate of Providence People's Congress, PPC. Thank you for coming.
And of course, Kayode Ogundamisi, social commentator, joining us via Skype from the UK. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time.